just popping in for a little live. This wasn't intended to be an epic live, but just to capture a couple ideas that I had on my mind a couple of days, and keep the skill set of content creation going, um, and just offer some value with this. And but right now, the best way for me to capture ideas is with the live function, better than wasting bandwidth on the phone. But it's kind of strange because I had a very idea, and then someone enunciated that idea before I got a chance to. And it's such a couched and nuanced idea that you'd have to be very careful how you how you would enter that or approach that very idea. But it's strange that someone came up and they made almost the same idea that I had in my mind the same moment, and that begs to differ. I've often thought about if life had been one person, on the calendar year of 2025. I mean, so the calendar, yeah, that's just a better way to say it, the calendar year the calendar year of 2025, but also 2026 as now and then. And there's a great movie from the 90s about like some girls. I think they were like some girls that were in high school and they're like good friends. I think it's called like Now and Then or something like that. There's certain things that pop up in popular media are deep enough to be like revelatory or like profound. That title, Now and Then, is one. There's also a song by the great Nas. If you listen to Nas album now, like what were you doing this time in this year? So I'll say in 1996, right? If you met me in 1996, I would no. Let's go a little bit before that. So 1994 or five, that time I was about like third, fourth grade, something like that. And there was this cool security guard. I lived in like a gated community. I grew up. So if you anyone wondering my background, like I up here looking like this, did you grow up around people that look like you, that talk like you now? I grew up in a gated community, mind you, but my gated community wasn't a high income. It was like a community for student families, like student family housing at the University of New Mexico. And it was right in I think that'd be south. I didn't grow up in South Central Los Angeles, but I grew up in South Central Albuquerque. Or yeah, I grew up about South Central Albuquerque, and that was a realized place then and now. And I'll be real enough to say I grew up on the street Buena Vista in Albuquerque. That's where the complex was on, and that I don't think that was a then I don't think that part we grew up like Buena Vista, like just south of Lead and Coal Avenue. So that wasn't a hood by itself because it was more so for like student families. So there'd be like a lot of kids there, and also like college students. So even back then, like you'd have like some people. I grew up like the big kids, the cool kids. They weren't far away from like everyone in the 90s was either about that life or they seemed like they're about that life, and you couldn't tell. But that wasn't a hood then. I wasn't clicked up or clicked in with anything. But I was like, I just grew up in those times. But it wasn't far away from some real hoods. But it had like a gated community around it. I mean, a gated fence, because otherwise it wouldn't have been as decent of a place if it didn't have those fences like that. It had this big, mean ass fence, but people could have got over on that fence, but they just kind of respected the fence and that it was a place about kids. So you really didn't, even like now, you don't mess up about kids, and you didn't do so then in the 90s. So it was pretty decent place, but it was still a gated community, but in South Central, Albuquerque. But this dude he was from Kenya. He was from Kenya, from Africa, and he would be like when it would get late and like the lights are coming on and stuff like that, and it'd be cool to be outside. He'd be holding the place down, keeping it safe, doing security. Yeah, this I can't. One He had one voice. Like I'm trying to. He had this sound in his voice. It was like it wasn't raspy, but it was kind of. He had like a smoky voice without being a smoker. He actually had a smoky voice from running so much. So he would just talk to my dad like he respected my dad. Like my dad, they were both from Africa, but my dad was more so educated. My dad was more of a scholar. He was just in school he was going to school for like actually for law enforcement. This Kenyan dude, but he was a real badass, and he was but he respected my dad because my dad was a scholar, and he'd always look at my dad like he would always listen to what my dad got to say. Like he would laugh, but then he'd be like he really check out what my dad got to say, but then he'd be like, so this your son here? But he was paying attention to me that whole time. He didn't like they'd be talking, but he'd be watching the whole environment, and he'd be having my back. He'd be having my best interest. So he put my dad up to putting me up to Yaffle Youth American Football League in Albuquerque as a boy. And if you just appreciate how high of altitude Albuquerque is, like your marathon runners, like a pro tip from them too, from Kenya. So you have a culture about running in Kenya, and also training in Albuquerque in Kenya. Like if a person were coming to America with talent or interest in being a runner from Kenya, they likely may migrate to Albuquerque because of the altitude. So I think Albuquerque has been the seat of training a lot of great athletes, including some of your great MMA fighters have come from Albuquerque. And I think they specifically seek that area out because of the altitude, but it's meaner. So it's actually a little bit. I was just putting together now that that man had been from Kenya, a great runner too, and in Albuquerque. So I don't know if he actually may have been aspiring to be a professional runner, but my buddy who was Native American and his dad did cool stuff with us. He was also a runner, and they would bump into each other together. Like I knew him from being cool with my dad, but then this other boy, I was cool with him, and he was friendly with our family, but he would be taking us to do cool stuff and like these running places in Albuquerque, like near these golf courses in like the University of New Mexico. And then I'll bump into this other dude, but he put me up to that football. And then so like, but football that was meaner than hell because those kids back then they had a real culture about football in New Mexico. And those kids grew up like there's some cool, like if you can imagine cool daddy, how cool daddy is. Imagine 10 or 20 cool daddies, and they all got their boys out there, and they're not pulling any punches around their boys or the other kid. They're fully expecting their boys to kick that other kid's ass with that stuff that they've been teaching that kid since probably they could walk. But they're also expecting that boy to kick their son's ass back, and they're not giving their son any pat on the back or any free ride or anything like that. So it was pretty mean around that. And then the altitude was so high is that I do like a lot of fitness stuff now, but it was actually meaner then as a kid to be doing that football stuff at that kind of altitude out there. So it was it was some real stuff, but I had to work up the nerve, the gumption to go to actual football practice, how tough it was. So I'd be listening to like Nas back in the day, just why I referenced that, like there was a It Was Written album. I would really bump that before I would go to practice. And I would also bump, like, you got Easy E, like there's a song, I'm on the radio. It's a dope Easy E song. And I would always get like I